I never planned on or lusted for success. I lusted for fulfillment as a musician. My dream as a 16-year-old guitar player was to play in smoky jazz clubs like my heroes did. It wasn't about being a star. It wasn't about being a studio musician. It wasn't about Grammys. It was about playing my guitar. So fulfillment and success happened to follow for me while I was fulfilling my life. That's part of just who I am. I'm not searching for the magical chords anymore or anything like I did when I was younger. I accept the fact that I play the way I play, and I'm very thankful that people like to hear it.
So here we are with a real life legend, Mr. Larry Carlton. So for everyone out there listening, Larry here, he's a 4-time Grammy winning jazz musician. However, his body of work goes well beyond that. He's known as one of the most prolific studio guitarists really in rock and jazz history. You know, some notable people he's worked with: Quincy Jones, Michael Jackson, John Lennon, Jerry Garcia, Dolly Parton, Steely Dan, Joni Mitchell. He's played on more than 100 albums that have gone gold or platinum. Larry, man, so glad to have you here. So to start this off, I'd love to talk to you about, your approach on guitar. So with jazz, a lot of guitar players and musicians of varying instruments, they can play a lot of notes. That's something I noticed with improvisational musicians, like a lot of notes, and sometimes it can feel very chaotic, for better or worse. But with you, your approach to playing, it sounds a lot like a singer, and I want to talk to you about that. Like, how do you feel like you gravitated to this approach with your guitar playing, and like, how would you sum up your musical philosophy?
Well, big question. I have thought about that question over the years. And I think those of us that have a style that kind of is our own, I think that style comes about depending on what kind of music we personally liked in our formative years. So you mentioned guys that play a lot of notes. Well, they obviously liked that kind of music. Me, I like melodic music with harmony. So I've developed a style of the music that I liked listening to. And I think that kind of helps define who we are as a soloist. It depends on the music we liked and we listen to, so we emulate that in our own way, and it becomes our style.
Mm. And you reference your affinity for harmony and melody, and I'm curious, like, what do you think your style of guitar playing, where this is emphasized, what do you think about harmony and melody cause a deep impact in the listener in the way that it does?
Well, again, the listeners listening to the kind of music they like. So for instance, they like Steely Dan. And when I'm playing, I play like Larry, and the melting of those two things, my melodic but sophisticated way of interpreting Steely Dan's harmony becomes together with their sound, and the listener reacts to the entire picture. They're not just reacting to my guitar, obviously.
Would you say that the process of writing music, of performing live, is a spiritual thing for you?
Well, it's definitely, I don't know if I would say spiritual, but it's very close to that. I remember when I was in college, so I would have been about 20 years old. I'd been playing since I was 6 years old. And I was a music major in college. And I remember jamming with some of my friends from college, and we were playing a Miles Davis tune. It was in somebody's front room. It was just an informal jazz get together with college students. And that was the first night that I went to that other level of connection with my guitar. I was playing my guitar, playing a solo, 4, 5, 6 choruses, And all of a sudden I went into what I compare to a runner's high, when a runner gets high and they don't feel anything anymore. And I just kept playing. And one by one, my other college buddies dropped out because I had been playing so long. And I didn't even realize they had dropped out. I was in that Zen moment of connection with me and my instrument. And after I experienced that night, that's what I'm always looking for now when I'm performing live, getting together with my heart and my soul, with my technique on the instrument, and nothing else is around me.
Mm. And of course, not every night can be that perfect night where you click into that Zen feel. But I'm curious, like, how can you best allow for yourself to be able to slip into that state on a given night?
Well, so sometimes it has to do with the other musicians that are playing with me, because it doesn't take much at our level for one person to feed a chord or hit a splash or a bass note against another chord to send us off in a direction that no way I would have gone if it wasn't for what was played right then. And then again, my eyes are always closed when I'm playing on stage. So I'm in that space. I'm available to go to that place if night allows.
So beyond, our subjective formative years and what we gravitate to as we're really building our musical palette, do you ever think about, like, what about music itself causes such a profound impact on us?
Hmm. I think some of it, for sure, for me personally, is social. I'm 74 years old now, and I still listen to the oldie station in my car from the 50s and 60s. It was part of my life as I was becoming a teenager and then growing into late teens. Those tunes were part of my life. And I think that definitely is one of the powers of music. It has to do with where you are in your life and what songs you were listening to that touched you. And then you carry that for the rest of your life.
Mm. So going a step further, and Larry, I know you have overcome tremendous adversity, and you've had your own healing experiences, and I want to talk about musical healing and, like, going beyond what we've already talked about. What do you think it is about sounds arranged artistically, aka music, that can cause for such a healing experience for people?
Again, I think it's individual. One song that touches me deeply may not touch you deeply because of where you're at in your life and your preferences. So I can't describe it on a global, description. It's individual, I think. The first time I listened to John Coltrane's Ballads album, I was emotionally touched. Play that album for someone else, and they may think it just sounds really good, but they prefer something else. So it's individual.
Mm. That sounds like a sign of maturity to understand how you might love something, but not everyone else will.
Sure.
Because, like, I think back to maybe me, yesterday or 2 years ago, getting all excited about a new artist, like, no, you gotta check this out. I swear it's the best. And
Yeah,
maybe my sister's like, no, not for
exactly.
me. Uh-huh. So jump into the side. We spoke a little bit about when you were with your college buddies and clicking into this Zen state. Um, I would love, so a lot of listeners of this podcast are improvisational musicians, many of them up and coming. And I would love to hear you elaborate on your mental approach to improvisation.
Well, with my experience, because I've been playing the guitar since I was 6 years old, the connection between my heart, my mind, and my fingers obviously is as natural as it can be. So I don't have to think about any of the technique or any of the, what's the word for that? I'm just in the moment because I'm prolific on my instrument. And with that kind, at 20 years old, I wasn't as prolific, obviously, as I became as I played more. And I was thinking it would be interesting if I had a tape recording of that evening I'm describing to you when I went to the place. I don't know what the content was, and I don't know how valid it was, but it was the emotional part that became important to me, not what I had played, but that I had gone someplace. So yeah, getting back to your question, man, how to get there, how to share with guys, how to get there. It's a process. It's a process. We can only go to a Zen place based on the abilities we have at the moment.
Mm. Can you talk to me about what your imagination is like musically? Like when your senses imagine the next thing you might play while improvising, what what is that experience like for you in your mind?
Oh, it's just an instant reaction. The mind gets an idea based on whatever it heard before, or I'm starting a solo, and it's just an instant reaction. You play two notes, and your mind says, "Oh, we can play these next notes," and you can play. Don't. It's so quick, and that's what I'm saying about having all that experience. The instrument doesn't hang me up when my mind or my heart tells me to play something. It's very, very quick, obviously, how it happens.
And it's so mysterious to me how like music
Mhm.
made spontaneously in the way you're describing can feel like magical to people with the subjective lens like you and I.
Yeah.
Is that do you ever feel like when you're on stage and the crowd is just having this amazing time, and do you ever feel almost like a synonym of a shaman with what you're doing?
No, really, when I'm on stage, like I say, most of the time, when I'm playing a solo, my eyes are closed. I'm oblivious to what's happening out in the audience. I'm so into the music and being available, as I mentioned earlier, that it's all about the music right then. And then when the solo comes to an end, oh, they dug it. How cool. They were on this ride with me, but it's not me imposing on them. They can choose whether to come on my musical ride or not at that moment.
Mm, I love that disposition. So, outside of music, I'd love to hear your thoughts on, philosophy, comedy, and how different things outside of music can maybe overlap or are related to each other. Like, do you draw musical influence from things outside of music?
Probably the answer is yes, but it's not conscious.
Mm,
I like to fish. I live on a lake and I love to fish with my family or by myself. All of that is input and my reaction to the world, my choices. But yeah, being a musician, um, I'm sure everything I do influences how I play. Um, I'm very blessed that in my home, we have four generations of Carltons living. My mother lives with me. She's 99 years old. My daughter and her children live with me. Katie's 40, 1942, and her children. So we have four generations of Carltons in one home. All of that influences how I react to the rest of the world because my world is this.
mm. So a big part of your music is the kind of sphere you have around you.
Sure, sure, the peace that can come with having family around me.
I'd love for you to talk about in your life and throughout your career what the difference is between success and then actual fulfillment.
For me, I never planned on or lusted for success. I lusted for fulfillment as a musician. My dream as a 16-year-old guitar player was to play in smoky jazz clubs like my heroes did. It wasn't about being a star. It wasn't about being a studio musician. It wasn't about Grammys. It was about playing my guitar So fulfillment and success happened to follow for me while I was fulfilling my life.
Mm. And looking back on the many, many, many moments of you playing your guitar,
Mhm.
do any stick out as bringing you a lot of fulfillment?
I'm sure there was, not sure I'll use the word fulfillment. There was the thrill of getting called to record with the Crusaders. I jammed in my bedroom as a 14, 15-year-old guitar player with Jazz Crusader records. And 7 years later, to have the opportunity and then be invited to record 13 albums with the Crusaders. That was a cool moment, man. It was. And I learned so much by getting to hear Joe Sample play all the time and being on stage with those guys. So that was a very fulfilling moment because of that history.
Mm. Jumping a little bit to the side, we mentioned the adversity you've overcome, and I'd love to hear from you, like, what the most impactful lessons you've learned about kind of getting out of a rut or getting out of a dark place when life can feel gray, and like the most impactful lesson you've learned about dealing with that situation.
Well, I'm not sure if you're referring to the shooting that happened
Yes.
in 1988. I was a victim of a violent crime and got shot in the throat. And to this day, I only have one vocal cord that functions. That's why my voice may cut out once in a while. And for about 8 months, healing from the shooting, I lost the use of my left arm completely. It completely shut down and atrophied. But I don't want to dwell on that because everything worked out okay. But the truth that came to me during and the healing of the gunshot wound was when my son Travis, who was 6 years old at the time, he just asked me honestly, "Dad, why'd they have to shoot you?" And my natural reaction, which means truth, was, "Trav, why not? I'm just another daddy in this world." That's the lesson of the truth of Larry Carlton. I'm just another guy in this world. Good things happen, bad things happen. When the shooting happened, I realized that I articulated who I truly am. I truly believe I'm just another daddy in this world.
And your use of the word just, I think, almost could be expressed in the inverse connotation. You know what I mean by that?
I'll let you explain.
You are one of the great dads of the world.
Well, thank you.
Well, anyways, moving along. Do you think those dark times and maybe even like dark musical moments, you know what I'm saying? Dark elements of art add a positive context to an art piece, but then also kind of drawing an analogy. Do you think these, looking back on your life, do you think the adversity you've overcome, the shooting, and then also other, dark moments
Mhm.
have added positive context to your story as a whole?
Well, sure, in a much deeper way that probably can't be explained. But just like me talking about the social aspects of the music we listened to as a teenager that stayed with us the rest of our life, that influenced who we are in some way. The same thing with any of those dark or very bright moments in our life. Um, help create who we are musically because those are our life experiences. Um, I happen to be a sensitive man, emotional, but not over, but sensitive enough to feel things deeply. So when I play the guitar, I feel it deeply. Other people who have a different personality feel it, not like that. So yeah, all of those experiences, dark and bright, uh, they come out in my playing.
So talking about your playing and looking back at how you developed your style, Can you kind of pinpoint any of the top, most impactful musical lessons you've learned that kind of gave way to you becoming the guitarist you became?
Hmm, it's been a long time. Well, when I was just becoming interested in jazz guitar, uh, discovered some jazz chords, we'll call them altered chords. And the sound of those chords to me, I was in junior high school. Um, I became very enveloped in thinking about all these things that I was being exposed to on the guitar. And I've told this story before, but I discovered as a kid, 14 years old probably, the G13th flat 9 chord. That sound, and I learned to play that chord, and I love the sound of that chord. But I started analyzing that chord in my head while walking to school in junior high school. And I realized, and this is technical, and it's cool for most of you guitar players. It seems simple now, but at 14 years old, to have your mind click on a G13th flat 9 chord, that there's an E triad sitting on top of a G7 chord. For me, that was a light bulb moment. Wow, there's two chords superimposed. Well, at 14 years old, that sent me on a quest of analyzing harmony and coming up with my own. No one was teaching me at this time. So I had to come up with my own theory of why that works. So without going into all of that, that's one moment that was a light bulb moment for me and definitely influenced on how I look at music when I'm playing.
And keeping your mind centered on those really early times, what would you say is the original reason that you loved music so much you decided to devote your life to it?
Not sure it can be explained, but I can tell you the circumstance. Um, there was an old acoustic guitar at my grandmother's house. I'm talking when I was 3 years old. And my mother had played acoustic guitar when she was a teenager in southeastern Oklahoma. I didn't know that at the time, of course. But anyway, there was a guitar at my grandmother's house. And my parents told me later that I was just fascinated with this guitar. So they said, Larry, when you're big enough physically to hold the guitar, you can take lessons. And at 6.5 years old, I could actually hold this big old acoustic guitar with no name on it. And I started taking guitar lessons. So I don't know why at 4 years old, I was so attracted to the instrument. One of those things was meant to be.
Looking back at those beginning stages of your career, you brought up the Crusaders, and the music industry can be hard to really get some momentum in as a musician. And I'm curious, what do you think gave you your edge early on when establishing yourself?
Yeah, it's I played and people liked it. That's the simplest bottom line. Meaning I was playing in a nightclub with my trio while I was in college, and two musicians came in that I didn't know, of course, at the time, and said hi. But the one musician remembered me 2 years later and thought, I wonder how that kid's doing. And he was one of the, excuse me, top guitar players in the LA session scene. His name was Louis Shelton. And Louis called me one day on the phone. He found my number in the Union book and said, you won't remember me, but I heard you playing at blah, blah club. I'm recording with the Partridge Family right now and wondering if you'd like to come in and do a session. Word of mouth. People hear you and they like the way you play. They don't forget. Bless you. Yeah, they don't forget, when you hear something. So those kind of circumstances. I had been called, I'll give you one more example. I was just breaking into the studio scene in the late 70s. And the session I was called for was a Friday night session for the folk singer from England, Donovan. Anyway, I get to the session and the keyboard player is Joe Sample. We had never met. That was Friday night. We did the session. Monday morning, my phone rang and the Crusaders wanted to know. It was their office and said, can you come in and record for the next 2 weeks with the Crusaders? They're already in the studio. Word of mouth, exposure, agreement. They liked the way I played.
Talking more about the sessions you've been in and really the social dynamics involved in the studio setting, like you're contributing to a piece that it's somebody else's baby. And I'm curious, like what you've learned about leadership, about being on a team when maybe you're the band leader and it's like the Larry Carlton trio versus when you're contributing on somebody else's project, and how you've really learned to properly, be the right kind of person in those different moments, and what you've learned about leadership, even when you're not the, selected leader.
Yeah, I think starting out being a session musician, you're a servant. I think if you go in with that attitude, then everything is going to be okay. Because you're there to serve the producer, the song, and the artist, and the arranger. So there can be, in my opinion, no ego when you walk in the studio. I'm here to serve this evening's project. And that went well for me because of that attitude. And as a leader on my own sessions, I appreciate that same thing out of the other musicians, but they know that I'm counting on them to give, hey, Larry, what do you think about this? I'm open to those suggestions. I'm not a hardcore play my notes and that's all you play. So the interaction of musicians becomes very important in my projects. Some of my songs became much better songs because of the musicians that played on them. Just like some of the songs I played on became better because that night's musicians contributed so much.
So we're in different stages of our lives, and with music, with improvisational music, a lot of that is taking a different perspective at your own ego, at your identity, and looking at the greater context that we're existing in, and kind of talking about the scare you had with the shooting, and then just being in your 70s now, and the way you think about the end of your life and death and what kind of might lie next. I'm curious with you, I see based on how you said earlier, like, I'm just another guy. What has it been like for you to kind of let go of, having a really strong identity and just kind of being open to whatever may happen, whether that's, end of life and the next chapter coming soon, or you're in a hospital bed and you don't know, like letting go of your ego. Can you talk to me about what that's been like for you?
It was a process, of course. When we're younger, our ego is naturally larger and searching. But I think as I described from the shooting and now in my 70s, I accept the fact that I'm not special, except maybe when I have the guitar in my hand. Other than that, I'm just a guy. So I've let go of anything that comes after that. I accept life as it comes day by day. Don't try to control it. Not necessary. I'm not in control, except when I'm playing the guitar. So yeah, I think I have a very simple philosophy now. The end of life is coming, whether it's 20 years from now or whenever. And that's okay. It's been a great ride. Happy to be here.
So with that being said, and where you are today, can you talk to me like about what does growth and improvement look like for you now?
Maybe just by describing more of my life, it will become apparent. For the last at least 10 years, I never play the guitar when I'm home. I only play when it's time to play, unless there's a big tour coming up, and then just technically I need to go down for an hour every once in a while, so my fingers don't get tender. So the passion for music is internal, but there's no reason I choose not to be absorbed in my guitar for the rest of my life. I never pick it up at home. I live life, and then I love it when I get to go play the guitar. It's the best. So that's part of just who I am. I'm not searching for the magical chords anymore or anything like I did when I was younger. I accept the fact that I play the way I play, and I'm very thankful that people like to hear it.
I love it. Larry Carlton, everybody. Larry, man, thank you for all that you've done for music, and thank you for coming on the show, Larry. So
My
great to
pleasure.
talk to you.
Thank you, buddy. I appreciate you.
Final question here. I want to ask you, like, you get one last song to listen to in your life. What song do you pick?
Too Young to Go Steady by John Coltrane.
Well, all righty. This has been the Weird Music Podcast. Larry Carlton, my man. Thank you. Take care.
Next time. See ya.
Well, if you made it this far, thank you for tuning in. Big shout out to our sponsor, Thrax. Check them out if you're looking for some incredibly high quality CBD and THC gummies. Also, big shout out to J&J Distribution. Retailers, check out their brands Kush Burst, Death by Gummy Bears, and Compassionate Buds. Also, big shout out to SEM Tickets. If you're throwing events and you're looking for a reliable ticketing source that's well priced, look no further. Got links in the description. Much love, y'all.